I love the idea of using very simple, very practical means of investigating these otherwise invisible fields.
Josh, how did you get involved in paranormal work in the first place?
Well, going back to my upbringing, I was born and raised in Asheville, North Carolina, heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And my family on both sides have been in that area since the late 1700s. And so I grew up hearing all kinds of wonderful stories about not only the history of that region, but legends, folklore, a lot of ghost stories that was very popular among the pioneers and the early settlers, as well as a lot of the fascinating stories from the Native Americans. And my mom was one of 10 kids, and my dad was one of 7 kids.
Wow.
And it seemed, it's a big, big family. I don't even know how many cousins I have. And so when I grew up, I was always hearing stories about, like, somebody encountering something paranormal. I know that we all grew up out in the sticks, and somebody would always have a story about, like, I saw a guy hitchhiking on the side of the road, and then he vanished in front of me, and just, like, the stories went on and on. And also there was a lot of reliance on sort of psychic ability, because the pioneers and the settlers, they believed that they had to use what we would consider psychic ability to survive. They had a survival instinct and an intuition. So I was always intrigued with these stories, and so when I was just a teenager, I started writing some of these tales down, and I also started making up stories. And I published a book when I was only 14, 15 years old. It was a book of scary short stories and poems. And it did well enough that the local newspaper, the Asheville Times, that people who'd seen UFOs or had seen a little person. And I would write articles about it. And you know what? At first, I thought this is all just fun and entertainment. But these people, they just seem so sincere, so believable on so many occasions that I thought to myself, well, okay, if there's something real here, I want to document it, because that's really going to make my article a heck of a lot better. And so over time, in order to become a better writer, I started learning how to become a better scientific thinker. And eventually I became an apprentice for a man named Charles Yost, who was a NASA Hall of Fame engineer at a laboratory there in West North Carolina. And I worked with him on many, many projects with high voltage electrostatics, Wimshurst generators, and Van de Graaff machines, and a lot of electric spacecraft technology. I learned a lot. What it boils down to is that over time, I became interested in the relationship between matter and energy, and these bizarre ways that matter can just materialize out of the blue right at these places where people say they're experiencing the paranormal. And it took me a long time before I ever actually started experiencing the paranormal myself. But now I'm far more of a believer than I was when I was a teenager, because now I've seen enough to know that, look, the paranormal stuff is rare. That's why we call it paranormal, but it is real.
Let's go to Brendan in Austin, Texas on the wildcard line. Hey, Brendan.
Hi, thanks, guys.
You're
I
welcome.
tried to call, and the internet crashed right whenever the dialing stopped. I got on the line, and my internet crashed. I was able to, super weird. I was able to put it back up, but I'll be quick because we're about to run out of time. Thanks, George and Josh. Creepy show tonight.
Indeed.
Josh, I had a couple questions. What's the average level of intelligent EVP you get? Do you think EVP is inherently dangerous? And are you planning on trying to communicate with the doll with EVP? If he doesn't answer those, how comfortable are you with EVP? And just for kicks, I don't know if you're going to have time to answer this, or if you can pick it up later, or just for everybody to think about. How does the K2 EMF energy that he's talking about right now fall into Newton's three laws, with the energy not just being created out of nowhere, just disappearing out of nowhere, just for people to think about? But thanks, guys.
All right, give us some EVPs, Josh, some discussion.
Yeah, Yeah, well, thank you, Brendan. You know, EVP is one of the most popular areas of research, but I am just not a big proponent of EVP, electronic voice phenomena. I have captured some stuff that I think is pretty chilling, but the problem is it's just almost impossible to distinguish between what you would think of as a paranormal audio recording and pareidoia, which is, you know, pareidoia in visual terms is like looking at the man in the moon or looking at a cloud and forming some type of an animal out of it. So whenever I get some type of an audio recording that I think might be paranormal, here is what I do. I will play that recording for at least 5 different people, and I will not tell them what I think it says. And if all 5 of those people hear the same thing, then I will say, okay, we may have something here. But that almost never happens. And, you know, I have a friend named Dean Worsing who lives in Maryland, and he is actually an EVP instructor at a community college. So I usually pass that kind of stuff along to Dean when EVP comes in because, you know, especially if you only have audio, you just can't know what all was happening in the room at the time. At least if it's audio from a video recording, you've got some visuals to make sure that there wasn't somebody around or something moving or creaking. So I'm just not a big enthusiast of EVP in general.
And sometimes it's tough, Josh. Sometimes it's tough to hear them. Sometimes you hear something like that. We'll be back with more calls with Joshua P. Warren in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.
Sign up now for Coast Zone, our free email newsletter. Get it today at coasttocoastam.com.
Honey, you look confused. What's wrong?
I'm having a hard time remembering to take my medications like I'm supposed to. I didn't say anything because